Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Oversteer podcast. Well, probably it's your first time listening to this podcast if you're not Greek, because we are a Greek podcast. I'm Dimitris with Marili. Hi, Marili.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great because we have a special guest today, and that's why we speak in terrible English. Well, myself. Marili's pronunciation in English is perfect. We have Blake Hinsey, also known as Brrrake. Hi, Blake.
How's it going? I actually really love the Greek accent, so this is actually a treat for me.
I've actually heard a lot of UK people say that they love the Greek accents in English.
I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
That's good because you're gonna hear that for the next hour or so, because that's all we can do. Like
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it.
I could do a Texan one, but you're from Texas, right?
Yeah. Don't insult me. It won't be that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure Dimitris the cowboy is a fantastic accent, but maybe save that for the the private content or the membership stuff. Not for everybody.
Behind the paywall, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Blake, I want you to tell us something about yourself. Where do you come from? What's your background and what you're doing these days? Because I'm sure a lot of Greek people actually going to hear this episode intrigued as to who you are and what you have to say about the sport we all love. So introduce yourself.
So my name's Blake Hinsey. I moved to the United Kingdom when I was 25. I was about 13 years ago to try and get a job in Formula One. My background before that was mechanical engineering, and like many of you, my entryway into being interested in motorsport came at a pretty grassroots level in terms of, for me, it was getting to experience club racing in a Spec MX-5. So a long series of events, deciding that I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, getting involved with the local Formula SAE program, or as many people in Europe will know it as Formula Student, through university, which is a design, build, race competition. That kind of solidified the idea that I wanted to be some sort of race car engineer in some description. And through moving to the United Kingdom, doing a master's degree here, and then getting a job at Force India, I don't like using the word luck because I believe everybody makes their own luck, but I think I was right time, right person, right place, as it always tends to go. And that kind of started my path down the Formula One route. So I spent 3 years at Force India as a trackside performance engineer, working with DiResta at first, and then Sergio Perez when he moved to Force India from McLaren. Then in 2015, I joined Red Bull Racing as a performance engineer. I was going to be Sebastian Vettel's performance engineer, but he decided to go to Ferrari. And the result of that, I got to work with Daniil Kvyat for a year and a bit, who is probably one of my favorite people still that I know in the space. Then I got to work with Max for a couple years after that. And then I went back to vehicle performance development in the simulator, focusing on short-term development, long-term development, special projects, modeling, correlation, visualization, all sorts of geeky stuff. And that's kind of like the last, if you include university, that's the last 20 years of my life. But now we're here making analytical, educational Formula One content and trying to stay out of trouble on Twitter.
Oh, that's more difficult than it sounds, really. We should know.
Yeah, it's difficult, but yeah, so be it.
All right. So you're kind of qualified to talk about Formula One, right?
I have an opinion.
You have a rough idea of what F1 is, really?
From a certain perspective, yes. But I will caveat to say that from there's a lot of different ways to look at the sport from a technical point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a lot of strong opinions, and I'm happy to lower my hand when I'm like, oh, that's outside of my expertise. I can't really comment on that. I need to talk to an expert about that. But for the most part, yeah, I think that. But I think over the last 2 years, my appreciation and view of the sport has also changed, because I'm now viewing the sport as first a fan, and second as a a technical analyst who is not affiliated with any team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important. Let's start by talking about your former team. And we should do a disclaimer here that it's purely your opinion. Like, I'm sure a lot of people will say, oh, he worked for Red Bull. I'm sure he has a very, I don't know, biased opinion about the team. But we've read you, we've listened to you in your podcast with Dan and in Breaking Pod, for which I have raced, by the way, on iRacing. Proud moment.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I love iRacing. We need to line something up, but that's another discussion.
Yeah. So we want your opinion on this year's domination from Red Bull and Verstappen.
It's been wild.
Yeah, because like all the records that have been broken are mind-boggling. 19 wins out of 22 races, 12 pole positions, 1,003 laps led. It's huge. And there's a lot of people who start to say, okay, you know what? The car is built for Max. Of course, Max will actually smash everything. There's no way Checo will ever have a chance. But the age-old question, from your perspective, from your POV, is it the car or the driver? Or is it maybe both? What's your stance on it?
Let's start with the answering the first thing that you addressed. And I feel like, I mean, for the idea of me having spent, what was it, 6-7 years at Red Bull, I do believe absolutely I will be biased. But at the same time, I feel like some of my biases towards that team will be also very honest as a result of having a close working experience with many of the people, as well as genuinely as a professional experience, a very positive experience in working there. So I think that's the first point to say is like, yes, I will definitely have some biases, but at the same time, without, divulging intellectual property or anything like that, I can also hopefully offer my opinion on some of the interesting narratives that people want to follow. And at the same time, it is my opinion, sure, but I'm one of the people that got to experience it. I was fortunate enough to experience it. So the question, is it the car or the driver? Absolutely both. We've seen Max perform very well against his teammates since he started with Red Bull Racing, and even in the Toro Rosso he was quite good, because he went basically from some F3 series straight into Formula One. Whereas you look at the trajectories of many junior drivers, like them, they would do karting, then they would do, a couple like Formula Renault series, maybe the 3.5 or whatever it was, then F3, then F2, and then sit on the sidelines a year and go into Formula One. Whereas Max jumped straight in and was competitive and quite ferocious right away. But if you look at this year, I mean, he's been completely in control the whole time in terms of, the performance level of the car, his precision, his repeatability, his consistency has been, it's been fairly phenomenal, honestly.
And we've seen it, like with other drivers being very good drivers, very talented, and being in cars that they wouldn't be able to perform. So with Max and the combination of Max and what Red Bull have created and what what the situation in Red Bull is, I completely agree that it's absolutely both. It's both the car and the driver. It's the combination of those two.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, like if you look at Checo, he's struggled a lot with this car this season. And having worked with Sergio, he's a very talented driver. Look at some of his performances in the past. He's very often been in the position to outperform the machinery, so to speak, in terms of, the team and him having excellent drives, great on the tires, managing great results in cars that probably shouldn't have been on the podium or winning races, but now, Max is a very difficult person to compete with. And I feel like there's several drivers now that are close to his level. But at the end of the day, we're never going to answer that question, who's on the top, because you're not going to have, those 4 or so drivers driving the same piece of machinery ever. It will never happen.
Of course, yeah.
I was reading a very interesting article from Mark Hughes on Motorsport, or a Motorsport magazine, I should say. And he said that the win that Max got in Abu Dhabi in 2020, which came at the end of a very dominant season from Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, of course, this COVID season.
Yeah.
Was like a turning point for the team for 2021, because they realized that he made the car a very nervy, twitchy RB16B car look better than it actually was. Because Albon back in the day said that if you sneezed in that car, it would actually flip. it would turn on its side. Like, yeah. I mean,
I remember that season quite well, and also I think Max, I don't remember the instances. Some of them were probably collisions, but some mechanicals. I think, Max had 5 retirements that season. Albon had 1 retirement that season, but towards the end of the season, it was getting there, But I think that is just the natural, you're getting to the end of a regulation period. You have a very talented group of people that work in the team, and you've got, Alex is a spectacular driver, but to his admission, that car was very difficult to drive. But at the same time, like if you look through his results that season, he finished outside of the top 10, 5-6 times, and very often 4th, 5th, 6th, 2 podiums. It's not too bad for Alex that season, honestly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that was probably RB16B was when Red Bull started getting it more together. And to be fair, I think in the COVID season, I was pretty switched off, despite running the simulator every Friday, shadowing the track and supporting them and doing setups and tests. I don't know, there was something weird about the COVID year. I didn't find that particularly enjoyable.
Well, obviously.
I think none of us did, to be honest.
Well, I was probably more enjoying playing Warzone video games in the evening, but
that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment something about what you said about Alex Albon. A lot of people started talking about Albon that year, saying that, oh, he's useless, and oh, he's not a good driver, and Red Bull wasted their time with Albon, and it was not a good call, and etc., etc. And look how he's performing now, that he's absolutely outperforming the car, Williams. And I just think that shows really everything about how not suitable for him the car was.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, because I got the opportunity to work with Alex quite a bit in the simulator. So when he was driving the race car, and then the next season when he was doing development work, Alex, his attitude is excellent. His work ethic is phenomenal. And his talent is genuine. That car, the RB16 and B or whatever, that one, the 16B, I believe it was in 2020, that was a really difficult car. And also to go up against somebody who, the combination of the car, the tires, the aero, and other characteristics with the chassis, which, were kind of difficult to pinpoint without a lot of work, and some of those things you can't really change. But, that's a really difficult thing. But I think absolutely 100% agree that Alex Albon has shown that he's a phenomenal driver. I think he's very good. Definitely outperforming the living crap out of that Williams, which is arguably that is not a great car, and that's absolutely fine and fair to say, but it's just not.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think that this whole season has shown for a lot of drivers that sometimes they drove cars that just were not that good, and didn't really let them show their full potential, or that environments are not suitable for them sometimes, because not all drivers work under the same pressure or the same amount of I don't know, expectations. Because I think Alex, for example, since Marilyn mentioned him, was promoted to Red Bull to cover for Pierre Gasly, because they thought that he didn't do a good enough job, and then Alex didn't do a good enough job, so in their eyes, and they replaced him with Checo. But you see that the right environment creates the right, I don't know, the right conditions for its driver. Do you agree with that? Maybe as a sentiment, Blake?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's as an idea and a concept, I can totally get on board with that. But at the same time, yeah, there's another one of the threads that we're pulling on there is the pressure on some of these guys, and I think at that point, Red Bull were kind of looking for two number one drivers, you know, because they had seen Pierre Gasly, who's another phenomenal talent and a very, very nice guy, a great guy. But, you know, you had them, you're like, right, Pierre Gasly is the next dude. He went over to Super Formula. I believe he finished second in that, which I talked with Liam a couple weeks ago about that. That is a very tall order to go over there and compete with those guys that are, you know, insane talents that have years of experience on the same, you know, 5 or 6 circuits, and they're phenomenal. For Gasly to go over there and have such a good result in that, and his, you know, his junior career building up to that, you're thinking Gasly's another, you know, Max Verstappen number one driver. And I think Pierre Gasly is an A-team driver, but at the same time, when you put him up against Max, that was quite difficult for him, honestly. But then I think at the same time, you know, Alex had been in the was it AlphaTauri Toro Rosso at the time, whatever it was, you know, for a short period of time. And then he's like, right, now you're coming up to the big team. So there was a lot of pressure to perform in the Toro Rosso. And then there was even more pressure to perform in the Red Bull. And then on top of that, the person that you have to go up against is probably, you know, one of the highest rated drivers on the grid at this point. Even that's a 2019, 2020 Max Verstappen. I think he was already, people were like, okay, this guy's got it. This guy's definitely got it. And they were looking for two number one drivers. And that pressure on them was possibly part of the environmental factor as well that wasn't so great.
Since we talked about, like a few seconds ago, not a few minutes ago, I should say, about Lewis and the domination of 2020, which was the last dominant season from Lewis Hamilton, 2021. There was a battle that he lost against Max and Red Bull, and then the new era started.
I wouldn't say, like, I know 2021 is a huge contentious point, but to the fact that the Mercedes, that Lewis and Max went into the final round head to head goes to show you that the gap had closed. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen another year in those regulations set, you know, like once everybody had converged quite a bit on what was happening, you know?
To see like a full year of really, really close battle, like exactly like it was in 2021 and even more.
Another year of, I don't think the fan base could have taken another year of that level of chaos, though. I mean, that was an insanely wild season.
I think nobody could have taken another year of that, to be honest.
My question would be about Lewis and the fact that he's in a situation that he cannot really capitalize on his talent because the car provides a ceiling to his talent and his abilities. So, do you think that actually sometimes there is a point that you say, you know what, mechanically, engineering-wise, we can't do anything more than that, especially in the budget cap era. We have to rely on the driver to extract every single ounce of performance from the car. And maybe if that's a bit of a precarious tactic, because you rely on the human aspect of it all and not the mechanical one that you can't predict, because you cannot predict if Lewis is going to be at his best every single Sunday. Well, you could with Lewis Hamilton, but you know, with any human,
Mm. I think absolutely you've got it's again the car plus driver. The fact that Lewis Hamilton is not winning the championship does not speak to. I don't think that speaks to Lewis Hamilton. I think that speaks absolutely to the last two Mercedes being very big departures from the previous domination, going from an engine dominated period to an aero dominated period. And I don't think in general that Mercedes, from a development point of view, are that far away from Red Bull. I think they simply made some decisions and gambles in terms of philosophy that they could never, pull themselves out of in that short period of time. And they continued down that path in 2023. But yeah, I think that is definitely the case. But like more often than not, I mean, Lewis has been extremely consistent. He's only had a couple of off races later in the season. So yeah, for me, that's quite frustrating to see.
Right, I completely agree with that because it's not that we don't know that Lewis Hamilton is a talented driver. Of course, we all know that. He's he has won 7 world championships that you can't win without being talented. I mean, that's self-explanatory.
Yep.
Um, so that's another case of what we were saying earlier about Max and the Red Bull car, that it's a complete combination of a good driver with a good car that provide and give you the best results possible. So, do you think that Mercedes will be able to, I don't know, correct their mistakes and move on to 2024, getting better and better and closer to Red Bull? Do you think the gap will be smaller in 2024?
I don't know. That's one of those things like I think a lot of people can have opinion on that, and I don't feel like I will have a particularly strong or convincing opinion about their performance next season. Because if you look at the development gap to Red Bull this year in terms of single lap pace, and if I'm just eyeballing it in terms of, race results, they've been about in the same spot all season. And you could pick metrics that go one way or the other, but for the most part, it's not like they've closed the gap this season in either single lap or race pace. Have they improved their car? To some extent, probably, but other people are improving their car more. And if, let's say, one of the narratives is Red Bull has stopped developing their car, that's fine. But every race weekend gives you the opportunity to learn more about the car that you have. So even though you're not bringing new aerodynamic surfaces to the car or new suspension bits, you are getting better at understanding the tires, operating the aero, and then getting the most out of tires on a single lap and on a race. And I think, that operational development, let's say from an engineering point of view, is something Red Bull has not relented on, despite possibly not bringing as many physical upgrades to the car. So in terms of the other teams, again, I don't know which pieces they're bringing to the races when, but at the same time, nobody's really getting any closer, which is alarming. And I personally, I don't like that, because I would like to see more race winners next season. I would like to see Max not running off with a large gap. I would very much like to see more fights, So I think it's a tough one, and it's a tall ask to close the gap on a team like Red Bull that have been not only outright performance spectacular, and then operationally in terms of what did they have? 1 hiccup this year in qualifying? 2? They had Vegas and they had Singapore. That was it.
Yeah.
Like those were the only 2 blips on their single lap performance, which is driver plus car plus operation.
Mm-hmm. So basically, what alarms me as well, because you said that it's alarming that no one really closed the gap. It's the fact that we might have seen, like I made an argument on Twitter the other day that this was the worst year of the 21st century. Like the past 23 seasons, this was the worst. And everyone's saying, oh, you know what? No, because we had Mercedes and Ferrari and Aston and McLaren later on fighting each other and stuff like that. But correct me if I'm wrong, from the way I say it, the pecking order didn't change that much as people think. I think it was the personal talent, the driver talent, or the right combination of circumstances that help sometimes create, to me, an illusion to what is an illusion. Because, for example, Aston Martin started the season strong. They seemed like they had the second fastest car behind Red Bull behind Red Bull for a mile, but behind Red Bull. But Fernando was out driving that car. He was absolutely jumping on the opportunity to capitalize on it, because he knew that this wouldn't be the case forever, and he explicitly said so during the first part of the year. But after that, I think that, okay, Mercedes climbed up, they stayed second, they finished second. Ferrari climbed up, they climbed up to third. Sure, McLaren crept up a bit as well, but they only had one properly good race, which was in Japan.
I think to that point, though, I will interject. McLaren are the team that has effectively closed the gap, considering they started, back of the field. They literally were in the mix with the last 3 or 4 cars, up to being one of the top 3-4 cars in that group. So yes, they did swap places with Aston as Aston's form fell off, but seeing a car go from a shed or a death trap, so to call it, to a sprint race winner, or did they, sprint race winner, race winner, like, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. They were on the podium a lot more at the end of the season. The single lap pace was great. They had a couple hiccups, a couple, flops, but at the end of the day, McLaren did turn around a terrible car into a reasonably competitive car. I mean, if they can literally just add downforce, they'll be all right next season.
Well, adding downforce is much more complicated than it sounds, right? Because
yeah, just add some downforce, mate.
The moment you add downforce, it's the moment you get drag. The moment you get drag, you start to removing downforce. The moment you remove downforce, you get slower in the slow corners, I believe. No? Or
add the adding efficient downforce, let's call it that.
Yeah.
That's what they need. which they did phenomenally from the start of the season.
On that note, a personal question, we didn't think it through before, but since you said efficient downforce, what does that mean? Like, in layman terms?
Yeah, I think so. The idea that you mentioned is, Formula One cars have a lot of power, and their top speeds are only as high as the amount of downforce they put on the car allows, because most of the thing, like you look at the data from a Formula One car and you notice at the end of a straight, it's not accelerating because it's generating the equivalent of close to 1,000 horsepower of drag. And that sounds insane. But if you, like I did a video on this a while back, if you are driving a Formula One car and at the end of the straight, you lift off of the throttle, the aerodynamic forces alone will cause the car to decelerate at 1G. That is more deceleration than if you're driving around in your sporty car and you stamp on the brake pedal. Your car will only produce about 1G of deceleration, whereas a Formula One car will produce that much deceleration just from the amount of aerodynamic drag acting on it at the end of a straight, which is pretty wild. So, as you add downforce to the car, you have induced drag as well. And the idea is the engineers, the aerodynamicist's job is to find, and there's a sensitivity to how much downforce you can add versus how much drag that downforce adds. And that tells you if the component goes on the car or if it doesn't go on the car.
Mm-hmm. All right. I see. Thank you, actually, because, we all watch F1. We all, some of us cover F1 and we have to understand terms. But sometimes when you hear it from the horse's mouth, if that's the expression, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like even me having experienced that so closely and you're talking about it, it's like, it's still, it is still difficult to comprehend. I don't think it's, we say, yes, I understand that. And it's like, do I really? So it's, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, surely it's we can understand it more hearing it from somebody that has actually experienced it than reading about it or just, you know, trying to understand it ourselves, obviously.
Yeah, and I think let's put it this way. There's a really interesting way to look at this, and it's the idea of the concept of the rear wing on a Formula One car. So the way that you think about it is the rear wing on the car, and we've talked about, you look at how curved or how deep the big, they call it the main plane is, how big or how deep those are, how curved they are. That controls overall the level of downforce of the car. So the bigger wing, more downforce, more drag. And then according to that, you then need to adjust the front wing angle to produce enough aerodynamic force on the front of the car to balance that out. But if you take a circuit, for example, every circuit has a different drag and downforce threshold. The idea of how much time do you gain through the corners versus how much time do you gain or lose on the straight as a function of those two things, right? And every circuit has a different sensitivity to that. Like you go to Monaco, if the teams could put a barn door on the back of the car and it would make more downforce with a load more drag, they would do it. But if you go to, let's say, Monza, you see teams running stuff that looks like a flat piece of wood for a rear wing, like as in very little. And if you go to even further extremes, you look at like IndyCar on the super speedways, they're trimming downforce off the rear of the car to take drag off of the car. So it's, that's the kind of idea is like, yeah, every circuit, on top of that idea of efficient downforce, then every circuit has a different requirement for how much downforce you put on the car.
Talking about car characteristics and downforce, we have the question that we haven't really posed to anyone who has an engineering background on F1. What is the most spectacular or exciting thing about these cars, the 2022 regulation cars? Because they are quite a lot different to what we were used to for the past probably 4 decades since the last time we saw a ground effect car on F1. So what do you think is the most exciting part of this regulation?
I would really like to have something super positive to say, but I don't think I can. No, I lie. I think the idea in terms of the regulation set is going from 2021, where you had Red Bull and Mercedes fighting for the championship, down to the line. People were like, great, this is what it should be. But at the same time, those cars were terrible at following each other. You could follow somebody for a couple of laps and then your tires would be absolutely shot. But with the, arguably, I think the 18-inch tires were not great. They're mostly a marketing thing. They're, from a performance point of view, they probably added a little bit of grip, but you could have done that before with more downforce. I think the bigger tires allowed the drivers to push a lot more for multiple laps in a race. And also the aerodynamic regulations allowed cars to follow more closely. And drivers are starting to talk about, okay, it's not that easy anymore. It's getting a little bit worse. But if you look at it objectively, I did one of my friends, Jasper, did the analysis last year. The conclusion was that the cars were able to follow much more closely. Does that make better racing by itself? No. Will it make better racing? Because let's put it this way. At the end of the 2021, that regulation set had been relatively unchanged for a while. So you started to have convergence among the front teams, right? So the front teams were getting much closer to each other. And you had people, the back marker teams are scoring points every now and then, not so often. But we're at that point now where last year we had a reset in terms of the pecking order. There have been some gaps, but the gaps are not terrible. I think it's just made that much worse that Max is winning so frequently. But I think this regulation set has more potential for the field to converge even more over the next 2 years. The 2026 power units, I'm not sure. but for now, up until 2025, we should see them getting closer to closer. And anybody that just, without any other information, says, I don't think it's working, that's not good enough as a explanation. It's like, yeah, I think nobody can tell you with any certainty whether the aerodynamic penalties for finishing higher in the championships in terms of wind tunnel time, the cost cap, are these things working or not? I think the cost cap makes it acceptable for smaller teams to just survive, even though, as James Vowles said, a lot of those teams are operating at a loss. They're not making money. They're completely in the red the entire time. So I think we need to wait and see if this is the right path or not. Anybody that says they can tell you whether or not it's going to work, I would love to hear a compelling argument that's definitive.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the order and the field moving or not moving closer together, let's say. What about Ferrari? What do you think their problem is? Because we've seen them being good, but also not good. We've seen them being quick, but then doing something completely off and ruining their own races, and with strategy and with their drivers not being definitely driver number one and driver number two, and mix-ups and everything that's been going on.
How much time do you have?
Ask him about Leclerc's driving style of throttle.
Can I clarify that quickly? Because that's an interesting thing. And I feel like I kind of made a mess of that situation, but at the same time, there were many people in that conversation. They did not want to have a conversation. They only wanted to assume insult. So Leclerc has this very interesting driving style, which is very reminiscent of old Senna, old Schumacher driving style, where you're using quite a bit of throttle to stabilize the car on the brakes, which is very interesting. So you see, he's the only driver that does it fairly consistently. Is he will be at maximum braking pressure, so like 120 bar, over twice his body weight on his brake foot, applying the brakes, and he will also be on the throttle pedal a couple of percent during the brakes. And a lot of people say, but this is a technique that he has. And yes, it's a technique he has that was probably very beneficial in, the F2 cars. And did he drive a V8 F1 car?
No.
See, he only drove the V6 hybrid. So
yep.
The point of view that I come at that discussion from is from a performance engineer that has had to work with a driver that had throttle and brake overlap issues. If it's a normal car, yes, that makes perfect sense that it can have some benefits to the dynamic characteristics of the car. But for the V6 hybrids, technically, it doesn't make any sense, the way those machines operate. Now, if you look at him, there's no debate that he is a spectacular qualifier, and on his day is probably one of the fastest drivers over a single lap. Arguably, the car often probably gets in Charles' way more than I don't think there's much of a talent issue there. Let's say I think he's one of the top few. He's exceptional, no debate from my point of view on that. But technically, that driving style in these cars technically makes it zero sense, considering the way that the engine, the hybrid recovery, and the brake system work together. And I could go, if you have like 2 hours, we can go through it. I think I will make an interesting video. The problem is that conversation is difficult to have because a lot of people will take that as me saying Leclerc does something bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, from somebody that's got a lot of experience working with those power units and those cars, the things that the engineers have to do to make that a viable driving style in the background is potentially hurting in other places. I probably come across quite rude saying that, but at the same time, until somebody else that has a first-hand experience setting up and configuring energy recovery, brake-by-wire, brake mapping, and everything else on a V6 a Formula One hybrid power unit, I haven't heard any good explanations yet. But the closing statement is Leclerc is extremely fast, so be it. Let him do whatever he wants. I think that's fair enough.
Well, the first question about Ferrari, what do they do? Like, why are they all over the place?
I think there's a couple things. So looking at their single lap performances this season, I mean, the things that stand out in terms, some of them are operation, getting the tires working and in the window, and other ones probably just car performance. But Australia, Spain, Japan, Qatar, and Sao Paulo were kind of blips for them in terms of performance. I think Sao Paulo, everybody was a bit all over the place. Australia was a bit tire warm-up in preparation and not being convinced on, do you do 2 fresh tires? Do you do 1 fresh tire? The same was true in Vegas, but they performed very well there. Others fell massively. It's one of those things I don't think I have a good grasp on it. Their car is terrible on the tires, and in general, they tend to suffer much higher degradation, with the exception of, I think it was Abu Dhabi was actually a pretty strong event for them. So, they can get it right sometimes. Sorry, it was Vegas. It was Vegas, and the idea of the cooler temperatures potentially helping them out. Summarize. I think the car has some balance characteristics that make it difficult to consistently extract performance out of a single lap. I think the difficulty is the car appears to be very stiff, which tends to make it, the car is stiff because they want to keep the car in the aerodynamic window as much as possible because it's potentially quite peaky. So there's a very high level of performance if they can keep it there, which requires them to set up the car quite stiff to hold the body and platform in that region. This is me speculating quite a bit, but I think it's not unreasonable at all. And then operationally, I think this season they've been a lot better, but like you alluded to, the idea of who's your number 1 driver and who's your number 2 driver. Are you taking points off of yourself? And I think more often than not, when both Charles and Carlos are very similar in performance and race pace, and they end up next to each other on track, they tend to trip over each other more than they tend to benefit each other. I don't think that's too controversial of a statement.
I would say that we've talked about this a lot in the podcast as well, that Ferrari is hurting themselves because you can't not have a number 1 and a number 2 driver because of the thing you said. Because
Lewis and Nico, that wasn't bad. that was yeah.
But that's a different thing. Because they're both going for the championship then.
Yeah.
But in Ferrari, this way, neither of them are going for the championship anyway, because they can't both go for it. They can't both shoot at it. And when they're that close in some races, as you said, they're taking so much time and they're losing so much time battling and ruining their tires and ruining their races and letting the people that are in front of them completely run away. They're just ruining their races completely by not deciding who's going to go in front and who's going to go in the back, and everything, that letting them battle on track, which is so unnecessary for no reason.
Yeah, I think that is a difficult situation, and on one hand, I do admire them letting themselves race, but at the same time, that did cost them P2 in the championship this season, potentially.
Exactly.
Of course, among many other things. I think more often than not, operationally, I think they can find the most gains there. I'm not going to tell them how they should do it, because I think they clearly will know much better than me and be able to reflect and be honest with themselves looking at this season. So I think that's definitely where they are probably looking for next season, is what they need to do with that, because they should be winning. I don't think the car is quite there yet, but I think it could be.
And I mean, the car wasn't that bad this season. It wasn't that bad. There were many races that they were actually close in qualifying. I mean, Leclerc got, 5 poles? Yeah, 5 poles, which isn't bad, considering if you look at their race results, that doesn't exactly translate.
No, I think a lot of the time is that comes back down to the compromise of outright single lap pace with a very peaky high performance car versus a car that is able to be kind to its tires. And the concept of, having worked at 2 different teams and talked to several people from several other teams, there are lots of different concepts and ideas of how are you good on the tires? What does it mean to be good on the tires? So I don't really feel like it won't be surprising to see if they still take some more time to figure this one out.
Yeah.
And I think it's because their qualifying pace was spectacular. But if you look at their ability to keep the tires under the car and make them last for longer stints, more often than not, degradation was a weak point for them for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go on to the final part of the episode and talk about your favorite thing about the TV broadcast, the fact that we have so many valuable insights, such as how many centimeters the barrier is from the tire. We're not going to name names. Like, I don't care. I'm not sponsored by the company of a certain guy who's bald and goes to space, but we're not going to name names because you're international and you're internationally recognized. So yeah, I don't want you to we can say it's from a company named after a big forest, so to speak.
Sure.
But before we go to that, I would like to ask you a question about maybe if you, I don't know, are you familiar in terms of, like, have you dug in F2 and the prospects there and the drivers that are talented there or not, before I ask the question?
I am currently very out of touch with any other series other than Formula One right now, considering how much time I spend every week analyzing Formula One outside of the sessions. I think I probably spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, probably 12 hours a day working on analysis and content about Formula One. So once that's done, I don't have time to watch any F2, F3. So I'm not particularly in the loop on the current talents. The only thing I will notice is Felipe Drugovich has been on the sidelines for 2 years after having one of the most mental Formula 2 seasons we've seen. So
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Because my question then can become a bit more general and maybe more easy for you to answer, because it has to do with the fact that, as you said, the F2 champion is on the sideline. There's no room for him in Formula One, and this is going to happen with Teo Purser as well, who was crowned champion last Sunday. That he will not have a grid spot for 2024. For 2024. So they're basically stuck with a team T-shirt and a pair of headphones.
Who posted that tweet, by the way? Was that Pers?
I don't remember at all who.
That kills me. But yeah, the idea that you win the F2 championship against the future talents of the motorsport world, and then then you're stuck with a nice top and you get to wear headphones and stand in the garage.
Yeah, next to the team boss, most likely.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, that was Pers, P-E-R-S on Twitter.
Yeah.
Absolute banger tweet.
I think I saw it from you. I'm not sure, or Dan.
I did share that, yeah.
But my question would be, because you've worked with drivers, as you said, and you work with their driving styles and stuff, do you actually have any idea, indication, whatever, of what the driver can learn from observing how a team works? Is there anything that you can gain as a driver by being in the debriefs and listening to the engineers, but not actually driving the thing?
Absolutely. But I think, that it's one of those things. Initially you'll learn, there'll be a lot of new information and a lot of new voices, people, a new language, even in terms of technical language between F2 and Formula One. Teams, have, let's say, your local dialect of talking about racing and performance engineering and the topics you're discussing. Those will be obviously very different. So you'll learn a lot very quickly from being at the track, in the debriefs, in the meetings, listening to all the communications on the radio, not just the ones that happen on track. And then also being back in the factory, working with the teams in the simulators, you'll learn a lot very quickly. But I don't know, do you need 1 year of that? Do you need 2 years of that? Or is, 3 months enough? Kind of, you get what I'm saying? Like the diminishing returns on how long that. Is Felipe Drugovich going to be a better driver from sat on the sidelines for 2 years listening? No. Absolutely not. No, is he gonna be much worse? I probably not, because he's probably quite talented, I'm sure, as many of these young drivers are. But yeah, that's a tough one. But it comes back to the situation. There's not a whole lot of seats, and not everybody in Formula One is there because of talent.
Oh, I loved that. Thank you.
No, I don't think we need to dig into that one too deep.
No. It's all right. It's okay.
Yeah.
We don't want to share people.
No, but I mean that's the truth. Like there's always politics involved in driver appointments, technical appointments, and everything else. So that's how the world works. It's not a surprise. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean that Max Verstappen guy. Of course, he's there because his dad is a driver, right? He has no talent at all. Like, why is he even there?
Such a paid driver, right?
Yeah. But I think now, I mean, it's probably gone from, Max being the son of Jos Verstappen to Jos Verstappen being the dad
Max's
of
dad.
Max Verstappen. Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's like, I don't think he minds. I can't speak on his behalf, but like at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's cool to see. Either way, like Max's rise through the sport, having worked with him since he joined Red Bull Racing, it's been very nice to see his hard work and dedication, his focus, and his talent pay off. Love him or hate him, I quite like the guy, but that's me.
Well, of course, I was being a bit sarcastic because
of course.
I didn't mean that Max is there because of his dad.
No, but exactly. I totally understand that sentiment as the sarcasm.
Yeah, because, well, of course, there's times that maybe your background, your family helps because your dad was a racer. Even Carlos Sainz's dad is a legend of WRC.
Yeah, he's a very, very known quantity.
Yeah, especially in Greece, we love our rallying because we have the Acropolis rally.
Ah, fantastic.
Carlos Sainz is absolutely adored here. Carlos Sainz Jr., not so much, but Carlos Sainz Sr. Is the absolute GOAT for Greeks, along with Colin McRae.
I bet. Of course. Okay.
All right. So to cap this episode off, of course we're joking about the slander for the TV graphics and stuff, but it's an honest question that I have from my POV. What would you like for people to see in the TV broadcast more in terms of graphics that have to do with technical stuff? Like, yeah, sure, the difference of I don't know, striking distance and stuff. Yeah, that works sometimes. That's nice, but I don't think a lot of people appreciate the technical aspect of it all. What would you propose?
I'm going to come back and I'm going to answer the question, but first I'm going to make a statement. I have to understand that the way that I consume and enjoy Formula One is very different to the majority of fans, and it doesn't make it a better way to enjoy it. It's just simply, my background through sport and motorsport is specifically technical and engineering and very heavy on the data. So, if I say something would be great for the sport, potentially, that could also remove some of the uncertainty and the charm of it. For example, let's say that it's a classic one-stop race, and after the first round of pit stops, you absolutely know the outcome. Do you want somebody to tell you, absolutely, this is what's going to happen at lap, at the halfway point of the race? I don't think you want to see that. So I don't feel like that adds much value. That being said, I mean, we did have quite a few one-stops earlier in the season, and that was kind of terrible. Honestly, it was terrible. But there's so much other stuff that I think you can start dialogues and have much more interesting conversations that will, it maybe won't be as broad and wide as a net that you cast to gather interest. But I think what you will find is if you can give more substantial threads and conversations to the audience that also appeals not only to hardcore fans, but also to new and casual fans. People always misuse the term the Drive to Survive fan, and I've been guilty of not correctly lumping together people that are fans of drivers first and then the sport, which is a different topic. But at the same time, what you want to do is find ideas and concepts that you can engage Dave, who's been watching since 75, and the young fan that is a fan of, let's say, a driver, but they're also very interested in the technical side of the sport and they find it a little bit too daunting. So how do you bring that in? And I think answering that question will answer a lot of that. But in terms of, looking at a race, I went and looked at, after the Las Vegas Grand Prix, I looked at the overtake and the battle, the cat and mouse game between Charles Leclerc and Checo Perez to see, where were they fast, where were they slow, where were they gaining. The people that work at the F1 TV and at AWS have all of the ability in the world to do some of this stuff, but I think I don't know if they're not interested or if they don't believe in it or if they don't have the capacity and resource to invest in it. But the idea, like the striking distance metric, or, the time until a car will close the gap metric data on the TV last week, none of those made any sense. They were all completely wrong. Every now and then we'll see like how fast a car is through a corner, like through one corner, and it's like, cool. But, Checo's faster than Charles through turn 3. Okay. But it's like, where did they gain time? Where did they lose time? And I think stuff like that, I don't know, maybe you need, not on the main broadcast, but you need an alternative side broadcast that people can do. Because I know a lot of people, I watch the main feed of the race and I also watch the timing screen as well. So I feel like there's stuff there that you can engage other people, or hell, even use content creators to help engage people in the technical aspects of the sport, because you can either build communities around chaos and drama and gossip and rumors, which are very short-lived, and maybe it's good for business, probably it is, which I don't enjoy, or you can get people invested in the technical aspects of the sport.
Well, I'll tell you something from the TV side, because I commentated on a race on Baku this year for Greek TV. Yeah. Well, actually, I remembered it last night because someone, there was a hit tweet somewhere saying, brag about something you did in 2023. And I'm like, I commentated in a race on Greek TV and no one said anything bad about me.
Hell yeah.
So that's something.
Hell yeah. You know what? The fact that you could do something in the Formula One space and nobody had anything bad to say, I would say you did a very good job then.
Yeah, I don't know. And I talked. Like, it's not like I said hi and then bye. I had an opinion, but yeah, I guess people didn't have enough time to curse at me. Maybe if I did another race.
Yeah, exactly. This Dimitris guy, get him out of here.
Yeah, exactly. But what I wanted to say, of course, is that I can assure you that a commentator has a gazillion amount of data that, well, we saw a bit from the video from Sky Sports, from Crofty and Karon Sandhook and Anthony Davidson,
yep.
What they see and stuff. But I can assure you, this is not all of it. We have the messages from FIA that are constant before and after the race, and we don't even use them. And I saw experienced commentators beside me not even paying attention, but I was like, but we should. But then they're like, well, no one really cares. F1 is a TV sport, basically, for the TV guys. And that's not bad. I'm not slandering anyone. It's not like I'm saying, oh, they don't know how they do their jobs. They actually know how they're doing their jobs. That's why they're there. And they're there to more like guide us through, as a viewer, guide us through the race. And that's why you need people like Martin Brundle, for example, or in other countries, a driver, someone who's a bit more experienced and knows the things from the inside.
Jenson Button is another spectacular example of a driver pundit who very balanced and very enjoyable to listen to all the time, as well as Martin. But I think at the same time, there's the way it's been done, but I think over time you will start to see that in order to keep people more invested in seasons that may not have as dramatic of story arcs, if you can give them something else to hold on to, the interesting technical changes, getting more context, getting more conversations with technical people want to see behind the curtains a little bit. And I don't think we're doing enough of that.
And I was going to say something about what Dimitri said with how the majority maybe of people that watch F1 maybe don't care about aspects like these. Maybe make them care.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Show them what they're missing and show them what else there is behind the scenes. And
I agree with you 100%.
That the data and the analysis of it all, and maybe make them realize that this is also a huge part of it. And it plays a huge and dramatic role to how everything is panning out in the track. And maybe that the majority of what they actually see on their TV is based, obviously, on everything else that they don't see, that is behind the scenes, that may be displayed through graphics or data or analysis or anything like that.
If you could see me in the background nodding my head, if we were on video, I'm agreeing with absolutely everything you said. And I agree with you. You need to, maybe at first, like you said, they don't know they want it. But if we can find advocates and people to help sell that and start increasing the number of technical dialogues around the sport, it's not for everybody for sure, but like offer more. There's more to offer, I think, than what we're doing now. And I think the reason you don't see it is there aren't that very many people in the space that can do it. But like, can I give it a great example? On the Sky broadcast this year, we've had Bernie Collins, former head of strategy at Aston Martin. She has been, for me, I'll call myself now an expert fan. Let's say that as an expert turned fan, she has made the process of enjoying a Formula One race very much more interesting. Like I know the commentators are spectacular on their own right, and they help highlight, the awesomeness that's going on. But like getting Bernie's insight to some of those races was very good to hear, because it was like fans can understand what she's saying, and she's enriching their viewing experience of the race. And then at the same time, like my ears perk up when she starts talking on the TV, because I know that whatever Bernie says is going to be very, very important to what's happening in the race.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great.
If that's 100%, like my reaction to that is 100%, like other people's reactions to that will also be very strong as well, if we can get more of that dialogue happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Blake, for coming to the podcast.
Thank you, Marily, and Demetrius. Thank you guys for having me. It's been fantastic to speak with you both, and I hope your audience. Do you usually record your episodes in Greek?
Yeah, we always do.
It's a Greek. Yeah, it's a Greek podcast.
Let me apologize to your audience, but I hope they enjoyed the both of you and your beautiful accents in English as well.
Well, it's not the first English speaking podcast we've had. We've had Ed Spencer, who is a common acquaintance of ours, Blake.
He's lovely. I love
He's
it.
amazing. He's amazing. We've had him for a couple of times. We've had Matt Bishop, who used to be communications manager in McLaren and Aston Martin.
Absolute legend.
Bryson Sullivan from Twitter / technical side of Twitter.
Another one of the tech head. Yes,
yeah.
Indeed. Okay, very cool. Okay, well, I'm glad to have had the opportunity to join that list of exceptional people.
So, of course, we'll leave all your social media links down in the description of the podcast for everyone to find you. And do follow Blake wherever he has an account, because whether it's X or Twitter, whether it's YouTube, of course, find his podcast with Dan, the Engine Braking Pod, which is amazing. I've raced for it, as I said, and the guys are absolutely mesmerizing. They wear funny jackets sometimes, especially when it's Vegas time.
Of course.
And of course, find Oversteer down below in its own right, because we have an Instagram page, we have a Twitter page, and of course, you can find both Marily and me on our media and on our social media profiles. Blake, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
And see you soon. Next episode you're gonna hear from us is gonna be in Greek. So, well, if you follow us, do learn Greek. I don't know.
Maybe get those Duolingo lessons in.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm currently flat out learning German, so after that, then I'll brush up on Greek. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.